At 5:30 p.m. on a Sunday, Beverly walked through our front door, tossing her purse and keys onto the nightstand. She made her way to the master bedroom, seemingly oblivious to my presence in the office. Over the past few years, I had practically become invisible to her. Approaching her, I retrieved her set of keys and took my spare keys back. Then, rifling through her purse, I removed her cell phone and wallet, extracting all the cash and credit cards. Just to be safe, I grabbed her driver's license before returning to my spot in the office. 15 minutes later, Bev emerged from the hall, well-dressed. She spotted me as she slung her purse over her shoulder and grabbed her keys. "I'm meeting some girls from work. Don't wait up," she remarked. "No, you're not going out with girls from work," I protested. "Jack, you should know by now you don't control me. I'll do as I please," she retorted. "I didn't say you couldn't hang out with girls from work. I said you're not going to. You're going to see your boyfriend, so don't lie to me," I stated. Beverly stood silently for a moment before boldly entering the office and confronting me. "All right, Jack, you know I'd prefer to handle this differently, but let's end it here. You have two options. Either salvage what's left of this marriage by granting me some freedom or face divorce and be cut out of my life. What's it going to be?" she challenged. "I'll take door number 3, I replied with a smirk. "Don't be childish. There's no door number 3. Either accept that I have a lover now, a real man, or brace yourself for the consequences," Beverly warned. I stood up, walked over to Bev, and pushed her against the wall, removing the engagement ring and wedding rings from her left hand. With my face close to hers and a fierce glare in my eyes, I whispered angrily, "Here's your door number 3. It's my front door. When you leave through it, it'll be the last time you walk out with anything and never return. You won't get another penny of my money. You'll lose your husband, your daughter, your house, your money, your car, and your job eventually." "You're living in a fantasy, Jack," she muttered nervously. "My lawyer will destroy you. Tomorrow I'll send the divorce papers to your workplace. If you damage me, you'll suffer more than I will." I pulled her away from the wall and dragged her toward the front door. Her heels caused her to stumble as she screamed incoherently. Bev struggled to maintain her balance, her composure shattered. Throughout our marriage, I had never laid a hand on her, and she didn't know how to react. As she began to regain her senses in the front yard, I shut the door and locked it. The lock had already been replaced earlier in the day. After Bev left, I made the first of 2 calls. I dialed my 19-year-old daughter's number at college. "Hey, it's Dad. Our situation with your mom has hit a crucial point. Looks like she'll be moving in with her boyfriend, and I need to talk to you about it. Just so you know, I've got our last conversation and tons of past arguments recorded. You can listen to them so you know the truth when she tries to twist things and blame me, which she probably will. Truth is, your mom's been cheating. Not sure how many times, but she's chosen to leave us for this guy. I'll explain more soon, but her boyfriend seems pretty sketchy, so be cautious in your relationship with her." I approached Patty, asking her to return home for the weekend. My intention was to have a conversation and offer her the chance to listen to some tapes if she desired. Thankfully, Patty agreed to come home on Friday. After sorting that out, I reached out to Martha, our neighbor down the block. "Martha, it's Jack," I said over the phone. "If the offer's still good, I'd like to take you up on it. Could you come over in about an hour?" I kept my explanation brief. I felt it was necessary to confide in Martha. Bev and I had met young, married, and soon had Patty. Things seemed good at the start, but Bev's demeanor changed rapidly. She became grumpy, manipulative, and controlling. I tried my best to keep the peace and make her happy, but it only seemed to make things worse. Looking back, I realized I contributed to my own suffering by constantly trying to please her. Now in our 40s, our lives were a mess. It wasn't long before I discovered Bev's affair with a man named Sylvester, known as Sly, who had a violent past. The realization that our marriage was beyond repair brought me a sense of relief. The following Monday, I hosted a gathering in the company break room. A prominent banner declared "Happy Divorce" overhead, with cake and ice cream at the ready. I eagerly anticipated the arrival of the process server. Fortunately, it was a pleasantly plump girl handling the task. Numerous photos were snapped as my co-workers and I celebrated the receipt of our divorce papers. I even took a picture while accepting the papers, planting a kiss on the server girl's cheek as she sported a festive hat. In another snapshot, I playfully fed her cake, both of us grinning. After the festivities, I emailed the photos to Bev, along with others from the party. Among them were shots of myself and Martha, my new roommate, lounging in bed with sheets drawn up, smiling broadly. I hoped Bev would notice her wedding rings adorning Martha's left hand resting on my chest. An hour later, I received an angry call. "You scoundrel, my lawyer will tear you apart after seeing the photos. What a foolish move," she barked. "Hardly, Bev. There's nothing inappropriate in these images. No nudity, just pranks between neighbors, just light-hearted pictures," I countered. "We'll address this later, Jack. I'll swing by the house this evening to retrieve some belongings. It might be best if you're not there," she demanded. "If I'm absent, you won't gain entry. All locks have been changed. If you need anything, be there well before 6:45. Martha and I have plans at 7 o'clock, and I'd rather not be late. Last night marked the most satisfying closeness I've experienced, and tonight promises to be even better," I replied, ending the call and ignoring her subsequent 5 attempts. While I hadn't answered all her calls since, I had listened to every message. Unlike other men in similar situations, there was a good chance Bev might slip up or accidentally reveal a secret in her angry messages. And indeed, she did divulge herself several times in the following weeks. At 4:30 that day, I drove to Bev's workplace parking lot, aiming to arrive before the evening rush. Confirming the absence of security cameras, what I had to do would be swift. Pulling up beside Bev's car, I circled around her using wire cutters to sever the valve stems on all her tires. Oh, she'd certainly be enraged, and there'd be no fixing them in time to make it home by 6:45. However, it was around 6:35 when she appeared, evidently having been out with someone desperate to return home. Having seen receipts for clothing she hadn't brought home, I knew she must have had plenty stashed at her lover's. She must have wanted something else. Slipping out the back door, I hurried to Martha's house, leaving Bev pounding on the front door and shouting. Upon my return that evening, I found my front window shattered, blood splattered around it. After reviewing the porch security footage, I called the police. The video depicted Bev smashing the window with a tire iron, her threats to harm me echoing clear. Unfortunately for her, the lock I had installed required a key from both sides. As she recoiled, she sliced her forearm deeply, inciting more screams and threats. I promptly reported the incident, and an officer guided me through filing a restraining order. The next morning, Bev was served with papers forbidding her from coming within 500 feet of me or our home. To say she was livid would be an understatement. "What in the world are you doing, idiot?" kicked off her next call, filled with fury and renewed threats. I meticulously recorded the entire conversation. A few hours later, after she had calmed down a bit, she called again. This time she mentioned sending her friend Lindsay to retrieve some of her belongings that evening. What could she be so desperate to retrieve from the house, I wondered. Suspicions brewing, I agreed to meet Lindsay at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday. To prepare, I left work a bit early to set up a video camera in my bedroom with a monitor discreetly installed in my office. Lindsay arrived promptly, and I greeted her warmly. While she packed some clothes into 2 black plastic trash bags, I sat on the bed observing. Lindsay looked at me nervously and then requested water from the kitchen. I smiled and left. Glancing at the monitor, I noticed Lindsay pulling a shoebox from the closet and placing it into a bag nearby. She then resumed selecting clothes. Upon her return with water, I observed her continuing to pack. She declared that it should suffice and requested me to take one bag while she took the other. Noting that the one she held seemed heavier, I offered to assist Lindsay, but she declined, insisting she was fine and asking me to grab another bag. As she began to fidget and move towards the door with her package, I questioned if there was anything in the package I should be aware of. I grasped her wrist and opened the package, to which she responded anxiously, explaining that it contained clothes and items that Bev needed. Realizing her lie, I confronted Lindsay about the odor emanating from the box. Upon opening it, I found stacks of worn $50 and $100 bills. Accusing her of attempting to steal from me, I rose to my feet and escorted her toward the exit and down the hallway. Lindsay claimed that the money belonged to Bev and that she was merely sent to collect it, denying any intention of theft. However, I pointed out that she came to my house supposedly for clothes but was leaving with a box of money, which in my view constituted theft. Threatening to call the police, I insisted that she prepare to be arrested for robbery. In response, Lindsay pleaded with me not to involve the authorities, citing her children and husband. I seated her on the couch and expressed my disappointment, stating that she would never be welcome in my house again. Despite her protests and tears, I made it clear that if she wished to make amends for her wrongdoing, she had only one chance. You'll leave this house and inform Bev that I caught you stealing. Then you'll report everything you hear or see to me, especially regarding our divorce or her relationship with Sly. You divulge anything about our arrangement, and Bev made a terrible mistake getting involved with this loser, and you'll ultimately help her leave him. I informed Lindsay that if she cooperated with me, I had the entire incident on video and could call the police and file a report against her at any time. Reluctantly, Lindsay agreed to act as my informant. As soon as she departed, I took the box of money and walked to Martha's house at the end of the block. She agreed to conceal it for me until I could safely stash it somewhere beyond Bev's reach. I knew the likely source of the money. Bev's Aunt Mabel, known for her stinginess, had passed away a few months ago, leaving Bev as her sole heir. While I knew Aunt Mabel had left Bev a small rural cottage, there was never any mention of money. It seemed that when Bev inspected the cabin after the will reading, she stumbled upon her aunt's hidden cash. When my wife Bev called, enraged and screaming, I recorded the conversation cautiously. "This money is mine, Jack. I want my damn money," she yelled. "Bev, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I caught Lindsay trying to pilfer money from my nightstand." "This is mine. You know exactly what I'm referring to. The money in the shoebox is mine. It's from Aunt Mabel," she retorted. Maybe Lindsay found some money in a shoebox, but if so, she likely took it and kept it for herself. I don't have it. And if you had money here unknown to me, you didn't report it on your taxes last year. I've reviewed our tax returns. You're welcome to involve the police and then well-inform the IRS about this money, letting them handle your tax evasion, I replied. She snapped before hanging up. I felt a need for retaliation. I'd pushed Bev's buttons too hard for her to simply disappear. Restricted by a restraining order from leaving her house, I anticipated she might retaliate against me through my car. Considering I'd previously vandalized hers, it was a reasonable assumption. Hence, I had a dashboard-mounted camera installed, but it wasn't sufficient. If she chose that route, I wanted clear footage. Thus, when I parked in front of the garage on Wednesday morning, I set up an exterior camera discreetly positioned. It streamed video to my desk. An hour before lunch, I watched on my laptop as Bev parked behind my car, got out and began smashing it with a hammer, shattering windows and denting panels. The sight of her breaking the windshield and yelling sent a shiver down my spine. I dialed emergency, and a police car awaited her as she left the driveway. Presenting the video evidence of my damaged Toyota, the authorities arrested Bev, recognizing her actions as a criminal offense. The resisting arrest charge was an added bonus. As she was led away, her pleading eyes met my silent stare. Bev's divorce lawyer phoned me Wednesday, notifying me of a court hearing regarding access to the money withdrawn from our joint accounts, set for Thursday at 10 a.m. I arrived at 9:50, wondering if Bev had posted bail. She entered with her lawyer wearing a smug expression. Addressing the judge, her lawyer asserted, "Your Honor, my client was denied access to the shared bank accounts after she filed for divorce. Her husband illicitly emptied them. We're requesting a 50-50 split." "Mr. Reynolds, would you like to address the court?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor. My wife, who has been unfaithful, has been withdrawing her own funds from our joint accounts for months. The money I withdrew was fair compensation since I cover rent and bills. She abandoned our marriage to be with her affair partner." Bev rose, objecting. "That's untrue. He drained our savings and checking accounts, leaving me with nothing." Her lawyer intervened, guiding her back to her seat for a brief conference while I presented documents to the judge. "Your Honor, these bank statements cover the last year. You'll see highlighted amounts including Bev's salary up until a few months ago, along with periodic bonuses. Then about 6 months ago, her deposit ceased, including bonuses. I have a recorded conversation with her HR confirming her direct deposit switch to her personal account." The total amount diverted from our joint account is significant. It's evident my unfaithful wife possesses substantial wealth obtained from our marriage. The judge scrutinized the bank statements and then addressed Beverly. Do you have any response, Mrs. Reynolds? Her lawyer rose cautiously, stating, Your Honor, even if my client has personal funds, Mr. Reynolds is still obligated to provide her with her fair share. Well, counselor, I don't appreciate deceit. Mrs. Reynolds claimed she was destitute, yet she entered with you. It's clear she was financially supported from marital assets, deceiving her husband and the court. Since Mr. Reynolds covers expenses from his own funds, there's no reason to alter the financial arrangements. Property division will be addressed in the final divorce decree. Case closed. As I left, Bev confronted me in the hallway. I began noting her threats. Bev, you're violating the restraining order. He'll contact the police if you don't leave. By the way, how was jail? Ready for more time there? You're facing criminal charges. Though she seemed ready to retaliate, I continued toward the exit. She stood, fists clenched, face flushed. Later that evening, I went to a different bar where I had previously encountered an intriguing man named Zeke. Fortunately, he was there. I greeted him and asked if he remembered me, to which he replied that my name wasn't important. Zeke then mentioned that he still had the beat-up car, expressing his disdain for it. He explained that his wife had taken the good one when she left with her new lover. He complained about the broken air conditioning and his inability to afford a replacement. I inquired about his car insurance and suggested that if he followed my advice, I might be able to help him get something better. Zeke responded by saying he was listening. Let's imagine you're driving down 38th Street and suddenly a gray cat dashes out in front of you. Naturally, you hit the brakes, and there's a chance the lady behind you might rear-end your lousy car. At speeds over 15 miles per hour, your car could end up totaled. But as long as you're firmly against the headrest with your seatbelt on, you should be okay. Insurance will take care of the damages, plus you could at least afford a car with air conditioning. But what if the lady who hits me gets injured? I can't do that to her. Well, I can assure you she'll be an unfaithful wife, and there won't be anyone else in her car. If you follow my instructions, what do you think about that? Oh man, that would be great. I can't stand cheaters, and I definitely need to get rid of this car. Park at the corner of 38th and Ling by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Keep an eye out for a blue Miata leaving the parking lot and heading your way. Pull out in front of it. She doesn't like passing other cars, so drive a block or so until she's tailing you. Then you'll spot a cat darting across the road. Get ready and hit the brakes hard. Just stay in the car afterward, dial emergency, and mention a possible neck injury. And by the way, we've never met. I won't be back in this bar and we don't know each other. Dude, I'm colder than the AC in your new car. On Friday, I left work early to meet my daughter at home as planned. She finished her classes and returned on Sunday evening. We discussed the divorce situation and I played her a recording of my conversation with her mother about door number 3. Patty was stunned by her mother's ruthless tone and demands. Then I shared recordings from the past 2 years, revealing a side of Bev she'd never known. Dad, I didn't want to tell you, but I also had an encounter with Sly. Mom called me to talk. I agreed but insisted we meet away from his apartment. She asked me to pick her up, but when I arrived, she sat me down on their couch. Then Sly came out and talked to me. He said since Mom wasn't coping well with her injuries in bed, I would have to tend to his needs. He claimed she owed him and I would have to pay for it. I looked at my mother and she just stared at the floor without saying anything. Sly told me to make her comply. Mom looked at me and pleaded, saying, "Please, baby, stay with him. It won't be that bad, and I really need you to do this for me." He then approached me, grabbed my wrist, and tried to force me to stand up, saying we were going to the bedroom. With my right hand on the pepper spray in my purse, I sprayed it in his face. When he pulled away, he screamed, grabbed his face, and I grabbed my purse, attempting to pull my mother out the door. But she resisted and went toward him. I yelled at her to come with me, but she chose to assist him in the bathroom, so I left. I can't believe my own mom tried to set me up with that idiot. I don't know if I can ever forgive her for this. I was boiling with anger, like any father in my situation. Contemplating my Beretta in the bedroom, I almost reached for it. After a while, my daughter reassured me, confirming she wasn't hurt and advised me to consider the future. I made Patty promise not to walk alone until after the trial and always to have protection with her. She agreed to only date fellow students and never be alone in public. Gradually, I regained my composure. Sly urged me to talk to the DA, but he didn't anticipate the conversation I had. I presented a recording of my daughter discussing Sly and reminded the DA of Sly's attack on me. The DA inquired if I'd consider leniency toward Bev or dropping the charges. Absolutely not. I insist on seeking the maximum penalty. Bev is under the control of this manipulative person, and separating them is the only way to help her. A stint in prison might straighten her out. The district attorney agreed, and the trial proceeded. I felt fairly confident at home and work, but there were moments of vulnerability, especially when entering or leaving the garage. However, I was cautious during my commute. Our house sits about 10 miles down the ranch road with only one turnoff in the next 15 miles. I was well aware of other potential danger zones during the long drive home. I always had my Beretta with me. One evening, a few days before Bev's trial, I noticed headlights of a pickup truck behind me about 2 miles from home, sending shivers down my spine. Soon it was tailgating me aggressively, just 20 feet from my rear bumper going 55 miles per hour. I called emergency on my phone and activated the voice recorder. As I accelerated to 70 miles per hour, the pickup kept pace. Frantically, I requested the emergency operator to contact the detective investigating my assault. The truck continued to tail me for another 5 miles as I narrated the situation. With the pistol lying next to me, I prepared for potential danger. As I approached a bridge spanning a small creek bed, I suspected the driver would attempt to force me off the road. Approaching the bridge about 100 yards away, the pickup accelerated, indicating its intent to force me off the road. I briefly glimpsed Bev's face in the passenger seat as it pulled up beside me. I braked sharply, causing the car to skid but maintaining control. Although the truck stopped ahead of me, my quick braking prevented a collision. My car slid to a halt by the roadside, its rear resting on a slope leading down to the creek bed. Exiting the car, I grabbed my weapon, phone, and recorder, descending the steep gravel slope beneath the bridge. As I descended, I noticed the pickup's brake lights illuminate. Navigating in the darkness, I cautiously felt my way under the bridge. Despite the risk of encountering a rattlesnake, I was more concerned about other dangers. Breathing heavily, I sought a secure hiding spot, eventually stopping and tilting the Beretta. I waited anxiously but heard nothing for a while. Cell phone contact with emergency was lost, and attempting to redial in the dark proved futile due to poor signal reception. I was stuck, uncertain if help was on the way. At least the ominous growl of the pickup truck overhead was absent. I resolved to remain stationary, prepared to spend the night there if necessary. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 5 or 10 minutes before I heard a siren in the distance approaching from the same direction as me. Realizing they were far behind, I began walking up the hill, leaving the Beretta under the bridge. Raising my hands as I approached the road, I implored the arriving police not to shoot. Observing 2 cars parked across the road blocking both lanes, I heard sirens from the other side and saw a pickup truck heading back to the bridge. I stumbled and fell into the mud. While my view was limited, I heard the pickup screech to a stop, and officers ordered the driver to exit and lie on the ground. Other police cars following the pickup stopped behind it. Soon, Bev and Sly were in custody on attempted manslaughter charges. Though deeply worried, I returned home, showered, and attempted to sleep to no avail. When your spouse faces multiple felonies, divorce appears remarkably straightforward. The judge expressed sympathy, and Bev and her lawyer offered little resistance, desperate to minimize her prison sentence. Bev proposed conceding virtually everything in the divorce for assistance in reducing her punishment. During the sentencing hearing, I testified to Bev's prior virtues before falling under Sly's influence. I expressed a willingness to forgive her over time for attempting to end my life, omitting her likely infidelity and years of torment. I could not interpret her facial expression in court, nor did I speak to her directly. Ultimately, Sly received a lengthy prison sentence. I hope he shares a cell with a burly inmate named Bubba, who finds him particularly appealing. The judge showed more leniency towards Bev, but she won't be eligible for parole for at least 3 years. It's been approximately 4 years since Bev was incarcerated. The DA's office informed me that she was granted parole about a year ago. I kept waiting to hear from her, knowing she's not in contact with Patty. Revenge seemed promising, but it didn't live up to expectations. I found myself unable to stop dwelling on everything that had unfolded so unexpectedly. I reached out to my ex-wife. "Bev, this is Jack. I have something of yours and I want it back." I phoned the rehab center where Bev resided. For a few moments, there was no response. "Beverly, I want to give you a shoebox. Can you hear me? Can we arrange to meet so I can return it to you?" I thought she might hang up, but finally she responded. "Where? When?" "I don't care. We agreed to meet at a neutral location like a restaurant, or you could come to my house. I suggested Sunday. Are you free on Sunday?" After a brief silence, she replied, "I'll be there on Sunday at 2 p.m. The phone rang. How does one prepare to confront their ex-wife, the mother of their child, the woman who attempted to eliminate them, and a convicted felon? I made lemonade and cookies. When Beverly arrived, neither of us attempted to shake hands or hug. We exchanged greetings, and I motioned for her to enter the office. Her hair was much shorter than before, and her eyes were stern. She wasn't wearing much, if any, makeup. Now at 50 years old, she looked 65. There were drinks, cookies, and a shoebox on the coffee table. She sat down opposite the sofa, and I offered her soft drinks, which she refused. Did she really suspect that I would try to poison her? Well, if you don't want lemonade and cookies, then I suppose all you need is the shoebox and whatever else we have to say to each other, I began. "What's the catch, Jack? What do you want instead? Is there anything left?" She remained very suspicious. "There's no trick, Bev. It's all there, except for a few thousand that I contributed with an equal amount of my own money and gave to Patty as a down payment for her house when she got married. If you wish, she can start returning your share at your convenience. I simply gave her my portion." I could see from Bev's expression that she didn't know Patty was married. "Patty has been married for 2 years, and you're already a grandmother." I sensed the tension in her eyes as she struggled with her emotions. "The little girl's name is Shannon Beverly Evans. Shannon is the name of her other grandmother." Bev's eyes filled with tears despite her best efforts. "Bev, I know you haven't spoken to Patty in a while. There must be a way for you to reconnect. If you want, I can facilitate that." Beverly nodded, tears now streaming down her cheeks. I reached for the box of tissues I had placed on the coffee table. "I'll give you the abridged version of our story if you're not ready to leave just yet," I said gently. She wiped tears from her cheek and tried to compose herself. "Patty found a great guy named Stan Evans. He's into computers and networks. They seem to click really well. She's a fantastic mom, and they're deeply devoted to each other. Martha and I didn't last long. She's too young for me and just needed me temporarily until she could get her life back on track. She found someone else and moved on. I date occasionally, but I end things if it gets too serious. I'm better off solo. I'll stick to being single." There was silence for a while. "I'm going to share some thoughts mainly for my own benefit, but maybe you can glean something useful from them too. I hope so. I couldn't wait to see you in prison. I loathed you and wished you dead many times, but when they locked you up, my feelings started to shift. I found I couldn't revel in my victory anymore, so I let go of my hatred for you. Even though you never asked for it, I forgave you because I know you're not entirely to blame. I couldn't understand you until it was too late and we stopped communicating. We were just bickering." Beverly composed herself and looked up from the floor. She gave me a lost look but remained silent. "That's the truth, succinctly and plainly. If you have nothing more to say and if you're not hungry, I won't keep you any longer. You probably have important things to attend to." She stood up and took the box. As she headed toward the front door, for the first time since I pushed her away all those years ago, I called out to her, "Beverly, it doesn't matter now. And you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm curious. Throughout our time together, especially on that last day you were here, it was clear that you saw me as weak. Do you still think I'm a pushover, Bev?" She paused with her hand on the doorknob and glanced back at me. She expressed her feelings bitterly, stating that she finally found peace of mind. I had been cruel. asserting that I had ruined her life. After a moment of pause, she added that she didn't consider me to be a pushover. Following this statement, she disappeared from my life permanently. Months passed after Beverly's final departure, and life returned to a semblance of normalcy. I found solace in routine and spent more time with Patty and my granddaughter, Shannon. The sense of family and normalcy was comforting, providing a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past years. One Saturday morning while preparing breakfast, my phone buzzed with a message from Lindsay, my informant. The message read, "Jack, there's something you need to know. Bev's been asking about you. She's been trying to reconnect, talking about making amends. Be careful." Reading the message, I felt a mix of emotions. Bev's attempt at reconnection was unexpected. I wasn't sure if I wanted to confront the remnants of our past again. I decided to keep my guard up but remained open to hearing her out if she ever reached out directly. A few weeks later, while out on a hike with Patty and Shannon, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered, "Hello?" "Jack, it's Bev," came the familiar voice, albeit more subdued than I remembered. "I know I have no right to ask, but can we talk?" I took a deep breath, considering the years of pain and betrayal. "What is it, Bev?" "I've been in therapy trying to make sense of everything. I know I hurt you, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to explain if you'll let me," she said, her voice wavering. "All right," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But it won't change anything between us." "I understand," she said softly. "Can we meet at the coffee shop on 5th Street tomorrow at 2 p.m.? "Fine, I'll be there," I agreed, ending the call. The next day I arrived at the coffee shop early, my mind swirling with thoughts of what Bev might say. When she walked in, she looked different. Older, more worn, but there was a hint of determination in her eyes. We exchanged awkward greetings and sat down. "Jack, I've been seeing a therapist for a while now. I've realized how much I let my insecurities and anger control me. I was wrong in so many ways, and I've been trying to change," she began. "Bev, I appreciate that you're trying to make amends, but you can't erase the past," I replied. "I know," she sighed, "but I need you to understand why I did what I did. It wasn't just about Sly or the money. I felt trapped, suffocated by my own failures and insecurities. I took it out on you because you were there, and it was wrong." I listened, feeling a mixture of empathy and frustration. "Bev, I get that you had your struggles, but you made choices." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I know, and I regret it every day. I've lost so much, Jack. I just want to make things right, even if it's just to clear my conscience." "Bev, stop," I interrupted. "I don't want to hear any more. I've spent years trying to make sense of your actions, trying to find a way to forgive you. But I see now that you're just trying to manipulate me again." Her face fell, and for a moment I saw a flicker of true emotion. "Jack, please, I'm trying—" "No," I said firmly. "You're trying to save yourself, not us. I don't want to tie my life to yours anymore. We're done." Silence hung between us as the reality of my words sank in. She looked like she wanted to protest, but no words came out. Finally she nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Goodbye, Bev," I said, standing up. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but it's not going to be with me." It's like she's completely disappeared from my life now. Years passed and life settled into a peaceful rhythm. I had rebuilt my life, focusing on my work, my daughter Patty, and my granddaughter Shannon. Spending time with Shannon had become my greatest joy. We often went to the park, had picnics, or simply spent afternoons playing in the yard. One sunny afternoon, Shannon and I decided to visit a local farm where children could interact with animals. Shannon, now 7 years old, was excited about feeding the goats and seeing the baby chicks. As we walked hand in hand through the farm, her laughter filled the air, bringing a sense of pure contentment to my heart. "Grandpa, look! The goats are coming over!" Shannon exclaimed, tugging at my hand. I smiled, watching her enthusiasm as she held out a handful of feed. The goats eagerly approached, munching away from her small hands. We spent the next hour exploring the farm, petting the animals, and enjoying the simple pleasures of the day. As we made our way towards the duck pond, an unexpected sight caught my eye. A familiar face from the past was standing by the water's edge, throwing breadcrumbs to the ducks. It was Bev, She looked different, older, but there was a softness in her expression that I hadn't seen before. She glanced up and our eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. "Grandpa, who's that lady?" Shannon asked, noticing my sudden pause. "That's someone I used to know, sweetheart," I replied, keeping my tone light. Bev walked over, a tentative smile on her face. "Hello, Jack. I didn't expect to see you here." "Bev," I acknowledged, unsure of what else to say. Shannon, always curious, looked up at Bev. "Hi, I'm Shannon. Are you Grandpa's friend?" Bev knelt down to Shannon's level, her smile widening. "Hello, Shannon. I'm an old friend of your grandpa's." We stood there in an awkward silence for a moment. "It's good to see you're doing well, Bev," I said finally. "I'm doing better, Jack. I've been volunteering here at the farm. It's part of my therapy. Being around the animals helps," she explained. Shannon tugged at my hand, eager to continue our adventure. "Grandpa, can we go see the baby chicks now?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, turning to Bev. "It was good to see you, Bev. Take care." So we moved on.